Hi everybody, Zellerant here, and if you're like me with the latest patch, you've either already or will soon be unlocking engravings. So I thought I'd just do a quick video to kind of discuss what all engravings entail and some potential thoughts on currently the mid-game and what you want to do with engravings, as well as what you'll be looking at for endgame. So now taking a quick look at my unit, what engravings are is effectively putting an enhancement on your weapons that will give a buff of multiple different substats that it can have. And you put, there's different materials that you can use on it. So you have the wand, or I think in here it's called staff. You have staff, sword, pentacle, and cup. And so you can do this on both your weapon and your trinket. Now, the big thing with engravings is depending on the combination that you use. For example, I've already done it on my coal. So I have a sword and wand configuration. Depending on that combination, you will get a specific buff. And there are different variations and different ones that different units will want, and there are some thoughts you kind of want to take into consideration when actually applying these engravings to your weapons and trinkets. So I've been looking kind of what people have been saying on Reddit and what the Chinese and Taiwan servers are stating that you should probably do with your engravings. But the first thing would be that in the beginning we are not at endgame as we're acquiring it, so you will be engraving these with the lower level engraving. So if you enhance and you go to gear engraving and select, you'll have your bronze, you'll have your silver, and then you'll have gold, and then you'll have the top tier ones that you can unlock. So in the beginning it's not going to be as large of an impact, because you're not going to be able to get the highest substats on it, but you'll want to at least throw them on there to get the combination buff that the units have. Now, one thing to look into in the beginning, you just kind of want the substats are less important on the beginning. It's just getting the correct engraving buffs. And so one thing I have found is that if you just want to try and get the one substat that matches your current character's main stat. Because what I found with bronze is you typically only get one substat. But I have seen the occasional two, which on my barrel I did a silver and I got two. I got defense and HP, which I kind of want to re-roll this. One nice thing is when you do re-roll, so I can actually do it here. So when you add it, and so this one I want staff, so I select it. You pay a little bit of gold, you pay the currency, and then you engrave. And it'll give you the new substats. Now, as you can see, this is worse than what I currently have. One nice thing about this system is it's not like the relic systems of other gachas where you just lost what you originally had. You can just quit and not take that. It'll give you a little warning that you won't be able to keep it. But you can quit and you can keep the original stats. I mean, that's pretty huge. Seeing as engraving your weapons and trinkets is effectively like your artifacts of Genshin Impact and your relics of HSR and whatever they call it in other systems. The weapons and trinkets all have static stats, and so when it comes to the RNG, it comes to the engravings as well as your Tarot Whisper. But the big thing that you can do right off the bat, as soon as you unlock it, is getting 2 to get the combined buff here. Now, looking at, I've pulled up a post that was on Reddit that had 2 images that kind of gave a breakdown of the engravings and what the potential stats you can get on them are. So like sword and, sword has the highest stats that you can get on them, while you have cup and wand, which kind of have the second highest in terms of the attack and magic attack percentage. And then you have the different combinations and what each one of them can give. Now in the beginning I would focus more on just getting one substat that you need, as well as whatever works best in terms of this. I wouldn't really care about combinations when you're using bronze and the silver upgrades, because they're going to get replaced regardless when you get to the top level. And different ones work for different characters. I've noticed that on a lot of people make these guides on Reddit and other variations And I'll be stating it in my videos in the future where I talk about a character's kit and what might work best on them. What is the best kits for them? So right now at the beginning, most people like myself probably don't have that many units. So I have, when it comes to my legendaries, I only have, what, 6, 7, 8, 9 characters. And all these characters don't really have to share weapons, because I pretty much have a weapon for everybody. I got four different swords. I haven't combined these yet, so I can get 4 swords. When it comes to my staffs, or not staffs, the pole arms, I've got a bunch of those. Staffs, which is probably what I have the least amount of. I have 3 at least still. Yeah, she has one. And then when it comes to bows, I have quite a few bows. I have one that's already 5 star. So in the beginning, it doesn't matter as much because you're not really having to share weapons amongst the people. Every one of my characters basically has their own individual weapon at this point. So you can throw whatever works best for them. So looking at this, one good example would be Alexi. He's kind of got a unique kit, and he has a unique buff that I'm going to want him. The big thing with Alexi is that when he dies, he doesn't actually die. He keeps himself alive for that turn, which means he's going to be in the dying state. And one of the ones that'll be lesser used amongst character would be the Pinnacle, which is when injured, increases damage by 5% and decreases damage taken by 5%. When dying, increases damage by an additional 10% and decreases damage by an additional 10%. So this one will be extremely huge for him because it gives him a 10%. And as soon as he goes down, he gets that 10% buff. Now, you could say that Sword and Wand still could be better. If you're moving them around a lot, you can get up to 12% attack and defense. But I believe when it's increased damage is better than increased attack percent. Because this is an additional multiplier on top of your stats, while this is just compounding your attack, which might not actually grant you a 12% increase in damage. It's just a 12% increase in attack. And you have to move to actually get it. So like him, I can put Pinnacle on both his pieces currently. No problem at all. I know I'm going to replace them, so it's not a big deal. So that's kind of the current mid-game, is just put what fits with the characters, try and get the good substats. But the biggest discussions are coming around Endgame, and once we start acquiring a lot more legendaries on our account. So I've seen there's a couple tactics that you'll want to do with characters, and one of the big things I've seen is the discussion on all your DPS are pretty much going to want sword in their kit, regardless. And because you'll want sword so you can get get 2 of their max stats. So when you're doing the top end game stuff, if they use the physical attack, you're going to want to get a sword that has 160 physical attack and the 20%, and then possibly one of these other. But you're going to want the 2 main ones. Or if they're a magic damage dealer, you're going to want the 160 and 20%. Pretty much every character is going to want a sword on one of their kits. Now, one thing that I found is the sword-sword combination is just an increased crit of 20% when they are unharmed. So this is nice on a character like Cole, but on pretty much everyone else, and especially when we get to the much harder endgame content, you're not going to be one-shotting enemies. It's going to be more about strategic, trying to have multiple attacks on them, doing big damage, but you're not going to be able to finish them off from the unharmed stat. So this one's pretty weak. So one strategy that I've seen is popular in CN was all your DPS weapons have sword, and then all your trinkets will have mix of wand or cup. And a big reason for this, which is a big thing I agree on, is weapons are less interchangeable amongst your units. So if they're a sword user, they can only use swords. If they're a staff user, they can only use staff. And so you want to target that, while your trinkets can be shared a little bit easier amongst people. Anyone can use any trinket. So you can mix and match a lot better. So if you have a trinket, if you have a character that wants wand, you can mix the sword and wand up fairly easy. Just make a trinket that you have the wand on. While if you need sword cup, which has the lifesteal and increased damage 5%, you can swap it out. So it'll be a little bit easier to swap the trinkets because they're not as big of a requirement to a certain extent. I mean, there's some big trinkets that you'll want on specific characters. I know, like, right now I have this one right here, the Old Scrolls of Auguste, which has the Knight's Faith built in. Like, this one's a really good one. And once we get to endgame, one problem you're going to run into is multiple units will want the same trinket or the same weapon, but they'll want a different engraving. Or so you may have we might get eventually a magic dealer that uses swords. Well, if you have physical on your sword, well, this one's kind of useless to them, and they may not want, and the combination might be different. So what I'm finding is you'll eventually, even when you start 5-starring your legendaries, you'll want to continue to collect dupes, so that way you can get 5 stars of multiple 5-star equivalents of all the weapons. So that way you can have a little bit more freedom of arranging your weapons. And that's one of the reasons to put sword on pretty much all your DPS ones. I think that, and then the reason you would want cup or wand too is it has the second highest, and both of their resonances are good. So sword and cup gives you that lifesteal and increased damage, while sword and wand can give you up to 12% additional attack. And it's the requirement's not too hard to meet. You just got to travel 3. And if you know, I mean, a lot of my playing in this, I'm moving quite a bit. Usually you're having to move to get around to hit the enemy in the back. And if you're right in front of them, I mean, that's 3 movements right there. You got to go to the right and go around them. So this is a fairly easy requirement to hit. And like I said, the trinkets are much more easily interchangeable. So very specific ones designed for supports, like this Book of Auguste on her, you can put the support one. Like, you know that this is primarily going to go to your support units, so you can put whichever one better fits the support. And that way, you're less likely to run into the issue of, well, both these units want this item, but they want a different engraving. So, I mean, the simple guide on that is just putting sword on all your weapons that go to DPS, or I believe the good one for healers was potentially, if it's a healing specific one, that you want cup on weapons. So it's a weapon that's tailor made for a healer, or a weapon that might be tailor made for a very specific unit. Like, I know, for example, when I get to the end game on, go back to the characters here. I know on Alexi, this axe here, the brutal axe, which I did finally level up from my last video. This one has the HP percentage and increases the damage if the enemy's health is higher than theirs in Norse. So this one's almost certainly going to be on a unit where you have lower health built into him. So this is like dedicated to him almost. And he's going to be in the dying state quite often. So this is going to probably be a weapon that I'll put Pinnacle on, just so I can hit either this one right here, or potentially we might have an axe user that wants to get Pinnacle and Cup to get decreased magical, or you can have Pinnacle Sword, which when unharmed, so you can take a first good hit, so you can have possibly a trinket with sword, or you can do Pinnacle, which has it where you can do the more damage. So it gives you a lot of options, or you can do Pinnacle Wand to get physical. So you can get both a tanking option. So Pinnacle on a tanking weapon gives you a lot of options on decreasing damage taken. So the Brutal Axe, for example, I'll put that. Because towards the end game, we're going to have to share the weapons. And you really have to be careful on how you spend them. Because a lot of the RNG, once you get those perfect substats, so you get that 20, what is it, 100 and... You get that 160 and then 20% substat on there, you're not going to want to change that engraving. I mean, that's your god rolls right there. And so you want to be very careful that you don't put the wrong ones on the wrong weapons. Luckily, weapons are fairly easy to grind. I feel like in a year, you should have multiple 5 stars of specific weapons. So, like, I've already on the bow, for example, I've already got a 5-star of the Irian combat bow. So that's just, I've pulled that one quite a lot. And then I already have 3-star of the meteor line. So eventually I'll get more Irian bows. And then I can actually, depending on my bow users, I can have one that's tailor-made maybe for a damage dealer or a physical dealer. And then have another one that's tailor-made for a magic damage dealer. For example, I think Nungle does magic damage with their bow. So they would want something that's different than, say, Fakel, or Fakel, however you say his name here. So, you definitely don't want to trade in your dupes, even when you already have the weapon 5-starred, because you may need to eventually have different engravings on them. So one thing in the shops that I don't know if I'll ever really get to using is I don't think I'll really be breaking down my legendaries ever, just because you never know if you're going to need them in the future. But yeah, that's kind of my quick thoughts on engravings. It's a huge power boost in the beginning. Like right now, as soon as you get access to it, just start throwing it on your units. So like her, I wanted, I haven't put anything on here yet, so we can go ahead on her. I'm definitely, I mean, I pretty much want sword on all my weapons right now, except a select few. So I can see what I get here. I'm starting to run low on my swords, so well, max XP and defense, that's alright for Gloria. I'll keep that for now. But you just want to get something on them, because right now the big thing is getting that additional bonus. Now I have this staff. This one gives plus movement, and I'm moving around with her a lot, so I definitely want to get on this one, for example. I'm going to definitely want to get the sword and staff combo here. And hopefully I can get... Oh! With the bronze, I got 3. I got a... I mean, that's a low stat here. But HP, defense, and some attack? I mean, that's pretty good for a bronze. And so now you can see my Gloria has the resonance for the movement. So she moves, she gets an additional 12% attack and defense. But she really needs... one thing I found is she's really good at doing some damage, but she doesn't take it as well as an actual tank would be. So getting that additional defense will help quite a bit. But yeah, just throw them on there at the bronzes. I mean, if you're like me, you're constantly running these... I'm just running this to get the Radiant Dust right now. I've been sweeping this daily, and you pretty much always are getting an engraving every time you run it. So I just got another sword. So just get them on all your weapons and stuff in the beginning, and then towards the end you have to really start thinking about it when you start using your legendary currencies, because another big thing I forgot to mention is they start to get really expensive. Right now they're cheap at 500 gold on the bronzes, but from what I read, it's 30,000 gold to re-roll it on the top tier. So everybody's worried about how they're running out of dust to level their weapons up now. Well, the problem's going to be gold once we get to the end game, because re-rolling this won't be that hard. You're going to be getting the legendary currencies daily as you're running your farm, but you're not going to have the gold to actually do the re-rolls constantly. So, I mean, that's the true end game, is min-maxing those relics. But yeah, overall you do have you at least can re-roll. When it comes to min-maxing, you have a good stat. Like I have attack plus 72 on the bronze one for him. I mean, if I want to enhance and I do my silver one on here, which I don't want to waste it right this second because he actually has a good stat. If I roll it and I get a bad attribute, it's not that big a deal. I can just I can keep my old one. It doesn't replace it. So there is no risk in that sense. If you have a really good one, say you have you just have just below the top stat on it. So if you have, I mean, I don't know how these roll when it comes to being lower, but say you have 150 and 15 on your sword one. Well, when it comes to maxing, you don't have to be scared of re-rolling to try and get the perfect god stats. But that's true endgame. You're going to first want to get good rolls on all your stuff, and then you really start trying to min-max these stats. But yeah, I just thought I'd go over these quickly. I plan to, in my future, looking at units, I'll actually discuss what I think about on the engraving side, what's good for them. mid-game and then what might be good for them in-game. They all have kind of unique little things. But some of the bigger ones that are very unit specific would be like the Pinnacle for someone like Alexi. I mean, then you have Wand and Cup, which will be really good for people that have large cooldowns, because there's a good chance of when using it at the skill, refunds the energy consumed and resets the cooldown. And that can only happen every 4 turns, but that means you can basically, something that has a 5-turn cooldown might now just become an instant, you can do it again. And that can be huge. And with us being able to use Backtrack, there's potential. I don't know how the manipulation is with Backtrack. If you say move to a different location and use the same skill, are you going to get a different RNG on that 50%? Like, because if it's anything like a game like Tactics Ogre, you can just keep trying to, even though it says 20% chance, you do something slightly different. It's a different roll than your previous one. So that one can be really powerful on people like Inanna. But yeah, I just thought I'd go over Engravings, and that's pretty much it. It's a pretty big upgrade to your characters, so you'll want to throw them on as soon as you get them. Alright, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks.